Welcome to Inside Insights. Thank you for joining us. On August 27th, a shooter opened fire on the Annunciation Catholic School Church in Minneapolis. 2 children were killed, and at least 17 other children and adults were injured. In the conversations following this attack and others like it, a new term is being floated to describe the impetus behind them: Nihilistic Violent Extremism, or NVE. We have 2 Insight Research Associates here to brief us on NVE and soft target protection. Angie Benda and Brenna Helm. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Brenna, you're part of an Insight project examining NVE specifically and youth mobilization to extremism. Nihilistic violent extremism is a relatively new term. What is it and what falls under its umbrella?
Yeah, so NVE is kind of that abbreviation or acronym that is being used for it. So for the sake of ease, I'll just say NVE. But essentially with nihilistic violent extremism, it's a bit different than others because it's this larger hatred or contempt for society as a whole. And so the desire with nihilistic violent extremism or extremists is to really prompt this kind of social instability and chaos and indiscriminate violence and things of those sort to try and accelerate this collapse of society or prompt the collapse is maybe a better way of putting it. But it's something that's a bit trickier to identify than some of these other extremist ideologies because it is a little bit more or less specific, like you see with, for example, white supremacists, or like you see with, environmental extremists, et cetera. So it's something that we're still learning a lot about and doing research to try and peg down. But it's, as you can tell from recent events, a pretty important and growing area of concern.
Yeah, absolutely. The investigation into the attack, the recent attack, is ongoing. But at this early stage, what NVE indicators did the attacker exhibit?
Yeah, so there are a few things that stood out in terms of kind of characteristics or behaviors that parallel those of known NVE extremists who have carried out attacks or been charged, arrested, et cetera, for NVE-related offenses. But some things that stand out with this particular attacker, you had this reference to various figures or symbols or slogans that are prominent within various NVE groups online. And so that's one thing that stands out. It has subcultural importance or meaning behind it. And so there's kind of this indicator there that they have some kind of engagement or connection to it, or the larger violent subculture with nihilistic violence. So on top of that, then there were writings that were really glorifying or indicating a fascination with violence, if not ruminating and planning and almost fantasizing about carrying out acts of violence and really trying to get back at the world in some way. So those were a couple of things that were standing out with the writings or with the video and things that were inscribed on the weapons and whatnot, really glorifying violent offenders and things like that, which is something we see with NVEs. Again, just lining up with that fascination with violence or that glorification of it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think one thing that is defining of this attack is that it's the age of the attacker. The attacker was fairly young, I believe 23. And so what's kind of the theory, because you're working on a youth mobilization project, what's the theory behind why younger people are mobilizing to mass violence attacks like these?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that we've been talking about and noticing with research that's coming out is with young adults, they're being exposed to content and extremist content earlier because of the internet and these online spaces. And so you have earlier exposure as well as greater opportunities to be exposed and that being desensitized to violence, for instance, and things along those lines. And there are greater opportunities then as well for radicalization, mobilization and those pathways, as well as becoming engaged with these various communities online, and then these things compound on themselves over time.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Brenna. I appreciate that. Angie, you're part of an Insight project on holistic risk assessment is what it's called with K through 12 schools. Can you describe that project for us? What does it seek to address?
Yeah, so the main goal of our project is to help develop a risk assessment tool that not only looks at specific threats, but a wide range of threats that schools might face. So some things that people don't necessarily consider in current risk assessments is severe weather, even all the way up to cybersecurity threats that schools might face, such as a ransomware attack, and other common threats that we do see, including school fighting or stabbings that might happen while students are in or at school.
How is security difficult in K through 12 schools? Because like we said, this was on the location of a school property in a church affiliated with it. How does that work with the soft target protection of K through 12 schools?
Yeah, so when we think about what a school entails, some schools are just located into a single building, whereas this private school was multiple buildings, including the church that was situated next to the school. And so schools have multiple different buildings, but in addition to that, they might have multiple different entry points. And so with schools, their primary function is to be a place for students to gather and learn and be a supportive outlet for that community they're in. And so we think of schools as being a welcoming place intended for education and learning. And in this instance, having multiple buildings and being able to access those buildings sometimes is an additional feature that soft targets such as others like malls or stadiums have, where there's multiple entry points. And then when we think about being inside the school, students are going in between classrooms and again, sometimes in between buildings, such as we saw with the church here.
Yeah.
And so we have to think about all the ways we can protect those and what options we need when we're doing a risk assessment, such as locking doors and even making sure that staff is monitoring in between the hallways or in between buildings when we're going through those areas as well.
So you guys are developing a risk assessment tool for K through 12 schools. Can you describe that for us?
The risk assessment tool we are building and currently have in the works right now is going to look at the different threats that we just discussed. And what we're going to do is make sure that that's accessible to schools and school administrators so that way they can do a self-assessment and then have their scores of what areas they need to focus on a little bit better and more present. And then with the way Insight likes to work and thinking about emerging threats, but also how we can be future-oriented and use new technology, the tool we're developing will integrate artificial intelligence in it to help the school administrators actually complete the assessment and then think about ways in which they might be able to protect their schools a little bit better with the information that they get generated from the report.
Well, we look forward to hearing more about that. Thank you guys both for joining us on this. I hope this has helped provide context. That's kind of what we're here to do for people who are wondering about these kind of attacks. So to give people more context on NVE, we do have a page on our website that scopes out the topic. We'll put the description and the link below. So please check that out. Thank you for joining us. This series is produced by Ben Badafarano, Aaron Grace, Scott Jordan, and Blake Ersch. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Insight Insights. The National Counterterrorism Innovation, Technology, and Education Center, or INSIGHT, is an academic center of excellence for the Department of Homeland Security. Looking to find out more? Check out our website at insight.unomaha.edu or email us at insight@unomaha.edu.